Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. See familiar faces. I've participated in the AICP Metro session in the past many times, and I'm glad to be present today on the research we recently finished. It's also a very timely topic. It's what the things that are changing in our society and related to urban planning. So the topic today is quantifying the influence of telecommuting on household total trips and the VMT generation. And so, I have some data here. You can see that telecommuting actually is not a new thing. You can see the graph on the left back to 1980s. There, in that data is for California. There are already about like 2% of workers telecommuting, and they grow slowly in the next 3 or 4 decades. And what really happened is, we all know, right? The pandemic, where you see on the left, on the right side. Sorry, it's the right side. It's jumped very high and then come down when the pandemic, everything passed and people start to adjust. But it's still relatively very high. The telecommuting, and that really has a lot of impact on what we do, right? Planners do. Like, for example, particularly transportation planning. That's my main focus of my research and teaching. Is like the biggest transportation challenge is the peak hour, right? Traffic in the morning, people go morning to work and come back afternoon, and that's where the transportation system has the highest pressure on that. But the telecommuting, right? If people were able to work from home or more flexible of not totally work from home, but partially work from home or other kind of combination. So they don't have to go to work in the morning and come back afternoon, right? That take pressure on the transportation system, and so potentially, right, there are research has been done in the past. See, telecommuting can reduce the number of work trips, and overall, that's benefit to the transportation system, right? Reduce the total trips people generate. And also VMT, potentially mostly, the majority of people who go to work, they drive, right? They generate VMT and all other negative impact associated. But at the same time, people also notice that, right? It's not all good. Yeah, it's good to take off some work trips. And people also find some, sign of when people, they don't have to go to work in the morning, come back at night and spend an hour, or in some regions maybe a couple hours on the road. They have more time, and they may do something else, to go to some other non-work related activities using that time. And additionally, it can increase the non-work related trips, right? So, but what, as a planner, we want to know, right? What is the overall impact? What's the overall impact on the trips, trip generation and the VMT generation? And so there are, researches have been done in the past to see the potential impact of telecommuting, and also the other, it's called rebound effects. The telecommuting can lead to the net decrease of VMT if it does not induce people to change their residential location to some farther away from downtown or more traditional neighborhood centers to more suburban area. And if the household members don't take advantage of the free vehicle to generate additional VMT, and also other like non-worker related trips, right? If those things doesn't happen, the reduced work trips can, right? We know they can reduce the VMT and total trips. A very recent study have done overall literature review to summarize what those things happened, be found in the literature, and they found that 26 studies reported reduced impact, but only 7 of them consider non-commute trips. The most of the studies, they say telecommuting may reduce the work trips, but besides the work trips, right? Everyone you have trips for other purposes, right? So we have to consider the overall trips as a person, as a household. If you have less work trips, your overall trips is the same or decrease, increase, is the overall BMT. How about that? So there's the part that we haven't seen much research on that, and there's some studies say the telecommuting people they travel farther. If they do have to go to work, because some people may relocate to further away to suburban areas, and they may do some more other than work-related trips, and sometimes they may travel longer distance. So those are the evidence, right, to say this is the induced effect by people who have the option of telecommuting, which can potentially offset the benefit of telecommuting on the transportation side. So we have to, on the other thing, we have to think about, right? The telecommuting, when people do telecommuting, and particularly now, like after the pandemic period, is oftentimes, there are people who work completely remote at home, but also there are a big share of people who do like partially telecommuting, right? When they do partially commuting, that partially, how often they do telecommuting, that's also a big factor of their overall trip generation and then BMT, and so we should consider all of those factors together and to look at more comprehensively, right, for the people who telecommuting, their overall transportation travel behavior changes associated with that option. So that's what the kind of summary what we know from the literature, and then this research we are trying to quantify those things by using a household travel study data for 2017 for the whole state of California. We got this data from the California Transportation Department for research purpose, and there are about 26,000 households across the whole state. On the right side, you can see, kind of, where those households are. Basically cover, the whole state. Some like, major MPUs, there are more samples, and fewer ones at the smaller places and rural areas. And we also have the, the geocodes of the household location. So that's very important, which also distinguishes this study from other studies. We'll talk more on that later. And in the household travel survey, the 2017, well, there's a new one now, but at that time, it's probably the first household survey that has a question about people's telecommuting behavior. And there are a few questions related to telecommuting. The first one is asking people whether you have the option of work from home. And at that time in California, about 16% respondents said they have that option. And then about 14% of them actually usually work from home. Some people, they have the option, but they don't work from home, right? So we'll use that data. And more importantly, there is a question about the frequency of telecommuting, right? It's the question is, in the last 30 days, how many days did you work from home only? That's the frequency, right? How frequently you work from home, and that's the one we take a deep analysis on that later on. And you can see the graph is the distribution we categorize them into 4 categories, 4 groups. Like one is people they don't telecommute, right? The second is we call them occasional telecommuters, which is the commute like less than 5 days in the whole month. It's kind of like just occasionally you have to do that, right? And the second one is the frequent. It's about 6 to 10 days, and the last category is regular telecommuters, more than 10 days. Like usually the work days in a month is about 22 days, right? And we commute more than 10 days, about like half. And then we will later on see how that affects people's overall behavior adjustment. And then that's the the mean the travel behavior data, and the second part is the building environment D variables. I think some of you have taken my course, you know what that is, right? The D variables, the density, land use diversity, and design, street design, destination accessibility, and distance to transit, right? Those are very typical, or it's become like classic measures for good environment, right? To quantify, the activity density, the streets, land use, public transportation, and aspects of the built environment. And we know that the built environment affect people's travel behavior and travel choices, right? And if you live a place there's no transit, you can't choose transit as your travel mode, right? And a certain built environment may encourage people to walk and bike more, right? So all those things are captured by those D variables. So we want to include that, right? Because that will affect how people's trip generation, VMT, besides has the option of telecommuting. And so we have this data, we have the household location data from the survey, so we know where this block group they live, and then we use the EPA's smart location database and to get those D variables to build a data set for the analysis. And then we do the modeling. Overall, it's like we model 2 things, right? We model the factors that affect how many total trips a household generate, and the second is we model whether people they generated VMT or not, and then if they do, like how much VMT they generate, and we use those those statistical terms. We can skip that. And then let's look at the result, right? The first we did some like spatial pattern analysis, just look at it overall, right, to see where the people live, telecommute, and then the trips and the VMT, because this is for the whole state of California. So we can't do this for the whole state. We wouldn't say much because people only the majority of the people live in the urban areas. So we use the San Francisco Bay Area as an example, and the darker the color is, that means the higher values for those things, and pretty much you can see mostly the high concentration of population or employment you would expect, right? The high values for telecommuting and total trips and VMT. And then one thing stand a little bit, it's probably not too obvious on these 4 maps, but on the VMT one, you can see that there are a few darker colored dots outside of the major and major urban areas. Those are like the smaller cities, more suburban cities where it's very typical, right? Like a smaller place, not much public transportation, just people basically travel to everywhere, so generate a lot of VMT. And then we look at we look at this distribution. Then we look at those the travel outcomes to people's socioeconomic characteristics, right? That's always the big factor, no matter where you live, right? Like household size, the income, those things are always matters a lot to people's travel behavior. And we do see, like in general, we group them into the 4 groups of based on the telecommuting frequency. And you can see that the VMT, like total trips kind of like increase as people have more frequently telecommuting. So that's just a quick look at our data. And also at the bottom, you can see the size, sample size for each group, how many responses or households fit into that each. Like for the regular telecommuting group, they're about 1.7% at the time. The frequent telecommuter is about 2.3%, and then occasional is 6%. So overall, that's about like 10% of people do, like certain level of telecommuting. And then with this data, right, we look at it like it's like a lot of literature studies in literature has done. We do some tests, to see the link between people, whether they have the telecommuting option. The first t-test is you see it's statistically significant that people who do have the telecommuting option, on average they generate about 9.25 trips per day. That's a whole household, not person, per household. And for the people who doesn't have that, the households who do not have that option, they generate about 6.8 trips per day. And you can see, right, that's significantly higher for the people who have the telecommuting option. And then we use the other variable, telecommuting frequency, in those four groups, right? And again, we see that differences, right, on both the VMT, total trips and the VMT. As the people telecommuting more frequent, their total trips and the VMT both increase. So that's what we see, the direct relationship without considering other factors, right? So let's just first look at that. And it seems very interesting, right? So and following that, we have done some further investigation. And we do some modeling process for that, right? With controlling for the socioeconomic variables like their household size, how many people are working in that household, whether they rent or live in their own house, and their income, and then the building environmental variables. I don't know, like over a dozen variables we have. Those are all the factors we know in the literature that they're important in terms of people's travel behavior and travel choices. And so we model that only, their socioeconomic variables. And the second model, we add the building environmental variables. The reason for that is, right, so is that, whether people needs matters to how many trips they generate and how many VMT they generate, and particularly for telecommuting people, right? And because, there are a big chunk of people, when they have the telecommuting option, they may move further away from the city center to some other, right? So where they live, that matters. And based on those two modeling, we can see that the telecommuting frequency variables are all significant in both models. So what that tells us, right, even though after we control all those factors, and the people who do have the option of telecommuting, they still generate more trips, right? So they still generate more trips, and which kind of like back to the literature we find, or the literature, a lot of studies say, when people have telecommuting, they have free time, free vehicles, or they may do some vehicle trips or some other trips, but overall their total trips is high, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? They generate more trips. On one side, they're more active. On the other side, we don't know is that, turned into VMT, or they may do some more walking back trips or transit trips, right? So we don't know. So we do a next step. We did another investigation on the VMT side, right? So they do generate more total trips, but does that extra trips turn into VMT or not? So we did the same thing, and modeling them with the socioeconomic variables and the building environmental variables, and we found that right, there are only like one telecommuting group left as significant is the occasional telecommuter group. So only this group, their actual trips turned into actual VMT. And for the others, and we didn't find the telecommuting frequency has any significant relationship with the VMT generation. So that's quite interesting, and can, like, the big thing we haven't seen in the literature before. And so that's come to the end, that the key findings of this study, right? To summarize that, we do, like, if you just look at the overall trips and the VMT, and you will find that people who telecommute, they generate more on that. But a big part of that, if we take into consider the built environment where they live, it's more a factor of where they live, less so about whether they have the telecommuting option or not. Well, on the other side, you could argue, right? People, well, yes, it's the result of where they live, but they choose where they live based upon whether they may have an option of telecommuting or not, right? So we don't know, like in this study, we cannot address that. We don't have the data about tracking people, right? So I think that will be in the future, right? We can track people who, doesn't have that option, then have the option, and then they move, and then track again to see their VMT and to generation. That would be a much deeper insight of the how behavior changes. But overall, it still provide us this information about the importance of the building environment and where people live, which the planners can still do, right? Where the planners can do, right? We can still promote the mixed-use development and some other things we do in the past, right? Doesn't matter, right? Even though the people have this telecommuting choices now, and their travel behavior is still affected by where they live, which planners has the power or certain ability to address and to build communities that were to make other modes of choices available, and encourage people to use other more sustainable ways of traveling and to reduce the VMT. And so to the end, to summarize that, right? And as we, for this study, we have done multiple layers of different analysis, and it's showing, right, when we do those tests, we see those positive relationship, and when we do the modeling after controlling all those factors, some of those relationships are disappeared. So it's very important to point out that if we don't look at this data very carefully, we may either overestimate or underestimate the effect of the telecommuting on the travel behavior, as some of the literature may have did that actually. And the second one is it's very important that the context, right, where people live, right, that's important. It's how people travel, what modes they choose. So that's we may see an overall trend, but also like the individual households, their local context is important, as we see here. And the third one is the telecommuting, right? It's still, right, if we can fully understand it to and then plan accordingly, we can still make that work for build a more sustainable and environment friendly neighborhood and transportation system to encourage people to drive less. So that's it's not something new, and planners can still effect that. Okay. So that's overall the my research part presentation. I think the more fun part is the discussion. So I'll try to answer as many as I can, but for one study we can only do what our data has. But for others, I think it's I may not have the answer, but I think it would be good to open the discussion to more broadly about the issue and the changes we see in planning.
And for those of y'all joining us virtually, feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go. I've taken a look at it and I'll pull those into the conversation as we go along.
I mean, I definitely have a question. I want to start the conversation off. I've been really interested, as somebody that does have the luxury of being able to, telecommute flexibly. What's been really interesting for me as, somebody that say it's 10 o'clock in the morning and I know I need to go grocery shopping at some point during the day, I know it's gonna be a lot easier for me to go grocery shopping at 10 o'clock in the morning because I know just from the activities and the behaviors of other people that there's probably gonna be less people at the grocery store. I can get in and out quicker. But I wonder if some of these luxuries and these benefits, as telecommuting becomes less of an unusual choice in somebody, or as it becomes more of the status quo to have that flexibility, maybe these increased VMTs from people who are telecommuters, the benefits that they get from telecommuting will slowly, as more and more people are telecommuting, it just becomes the status quo, and so there's less of this high demand in the morning, high demand in the evening. Let me get my non-work related travel done during the day, because at some point it just becomes, there is no rush hour, right? It's just people do. So I'm wondering what the impact on, say, like a transit system that's built around these high peak hours and these high times that we know that people are going to get into the office at 8 and they're going to leave at 5. They're going to get in. What does that look like, and how do we work with these shifting trends toward, well, maybe we do need the same amount of headways at 10 o'clock in the morning as we need at 8? How do we work with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, or think about the telecommuting when it's getting more and more popular in the future, how our public transportation service is going to look at, right? And I think it can be either a good way or a bad way, right?
Yeah.
So traditionally we do the transportation planning for the public transit, right? We serve where people live to the employment centers,
right?
And in the peak hours,
right?
With more highways, it's good to move people
right
to there. And then during the day you can provide mass, but that put you pressure on, you have to meet that peak demand at that time. Where as you described, if the telecommuting becomes more and more popular, the demand can fight out for the whole day, but not get that high. So for transit agencies, it's easier for them.
I would think that would be cost saving, yeah.
Right. So you don't have 100 buses now. They get, it didn't get that high. They may just have 50 buses. They can serve the whole day to cover this. I think it could be go both ways. I think already after the pandemic, a lot of transit agencies are redesigning their networks, including RT here. But I think all those things, they're changing, they're adjust their services, and I think maybe in the future telecom will become even bigger. They need to do that again.
Yes. So we have.
Yeah.
My question was kind of similar one. I'm surprised that the VMT wasn't significant for people that work from home all the time. That was interesting to me. And I think particularly because we're working on this DOT long range plan right now, and one of the future scenarios we're looking at is okay, everyone moves to rural areas and works from home. All travel happens during the day now, and nobody's commute, we do it really extreme.
Yeah.
But I hear that a lot from a lot of clients that they want to focus on this idea that the travel is going to shift to the daytime, right? People are going to be on the road, and what's our peak hour going to look like? And are we going to, I don't know, we're also building the multimodal LOS models and things like that. So it's all getting more dynamic. And I guess I'm just surprised to see that the people who work from home all the time didn't have an increase. And I was wondering, what did you do previous years to compare to see if there was some spike in 2020? Everyone was on the road during the day, I guess, because they weren't, because we were in quarantine. But I don't know, I wonder, a comparison, was this 2024 data?
No, it's quite old. It's 2017, yeah.
Oh, this was 17.
Yeah, so this is the pre-COVID data, and the
Sorry, I missed
longitudinal study is, hopefully forthcoming to see how that's shifted.
Yeah, we are having another study ongoing to compare 2017 and 2022, the most recent survey data. We'll see that. But yeah, I think, for this study, we don't have the ability to address that, but I'm guessing the one reason for that, people who tend to commute more, but doesn't generate more VMT is the trip chaining. I think you probably heard about that, right? So you're not rushing to, for working trip in the morning, in 20 minutes I have to be in my office. You can't do everything else. You just drive from your home to work. But when you have the free time, you don't have the pressure to get to office at certain time. You may do like multiple trips, just one. Right, go. Yeah, so that.
Back and forth there, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that turns to like more trips, but not necessarily like more VMT, because you combine them together to, go multiple things at, the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, I'll go later.
Yeah, go ahead.
Circle back.
In front.
Kind of like a follow-up to what we were talking about. For the longitudinal study, is it going to be California again?
It's
Or-
national.
Oh, it's a national.
You're
Okay.
gonna, well, that's the good thing that, the bad thing, or not bad thing, that we don't have the ability for that longitudinal study. It's the building environment. We can't control that for the whole country. Or, the smart location database does cover the whole country, but the NHTS, when you don't get the geographic identification of those houses, you don't know where they live, so you can't. But we can compare like those other things, that are travel times. Yeah.
And I have like a second part. Just in general, do you think that it would vary state by state? Because especially with like the amount of like capitals or like the urban areas, and then with the travel patterns and the living patterns too. So if people don't have to commute, will they look farther like we were talking about, or?
I think they do have that word about whether you're living in the urban area or rural area. I don't know if they're like suburban or something. There is a variable categorized like the type of places people need. So I think that can, provide separate them to see the differences.
Yeah, I just all chime in there. I definitely think there's regional context, and I think looking at, with this study, looking at pre-COVID data, one of the advantages, but also limitations of the study that we're talking about today is that it does look at California where, telecommuting was adopted to a much greater degree much earlier than other places. So in 2017, we already see that shift to that mode. But it also does represent sort of a more unique set of circumstances with more like high-tech companies and certain other things that, affected that shift. So once we have the 2022 NHTS data, we can also compare different parts of the country to see if there's, different relationships in different parts of the country. So that'll be something to look at in future studies as well.
You mentioned trip chaining. The way the data comes to you is trip chaining sort of accounted for as all one trip. So folks who are commuting to work and then they're going several places on the way home from that just comes out as one commute trip rather than splitting it out into one almost separate trip. So I'm wondering if that is really what accounts for a significant chunk of that difference. Is just that people's trips are multi-purpose over time, and that kind of also links to you alluded to the VMT question. Like, is it all VMT, or are some of those trips being completed by other modes, and so they're not contributing to VMT? I'm just curious where the data sort of lets off in terms of what we can't know from looking at NHTS about some of those questions about how people are planning their trips and making changes in their mode shift at all.
Yeah, for this one, we can't use that because we aggregate this to the household level. But yeah, there is another way. Yeah, if we focus on the individual trips, from the data,
So
you
future
definitely
research could dig into that.
right. You can create based on the data, you can create trip chains, like to say, for one person they may have like 8 trips in a day, but like there are 2 chains. Like one, they go from home, drop the kids, go to work and lunch, and pick up kids and come back, right? So that's one. And maybe after dinner, do another trip to do some other shopping and back. So if we do a trip level analysis, we will be able to see that.
I have a question here from one of our virtual participants. Guang, can you speak to how NHTS data can be used as compared to commute data available from the Census's American Community Survey?
That's a good question. Yeah, those actually a great question. So those two data sets are actually the main sources for for us to know about people's travel behavior and at the national level, the data available. But I think they are asking very different aspects. So first of all, both are surveys. So as we all know, right? Survey has errors in there, so don't consider this 100% accurate. And the household survey, I would say, if we're doing something about overall travel behavior, the HTS is more comprehensive. So it's asked people for a certain day for 24 hours, every member in the house, where they go, how they get there, for what purposes. Where the ACS data is only focused on the commute part. It doesn't hear about others. I mean, there's no information about other travel. It's just particularly on commuting. So if that's what you want to know, it's good.
Thanks. We have some more questions. Yeah.
What about vehicle hours traveled versus miles? There's quite a big difference there, right? You said that they're going longer distances when they work occasionally or in the office because they live so much further from the office. So I guess we have that.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Those are different ways of measuring, how much people drive. And oftentimes we use VMT a lot. I'm not too familiar with the VHT, the vehicle hours travel. But I think, a big, in some circumstances, they may be very different, like depending on the traffic, the condition of the system, they could be very different.
We're thinking about traffic planning. I wonder what shifts there will be in our performance metrics and how we decide to kind of quantify these things moving forward.
I don't know if anybody had a question specific to equity, but in talking about work from home and flexibility and all that, my first thought, especially in a city like New Orleans, is how can we address some of our equitability issues? Because obviously most jobs that people have in New Orleans, you can't just say, I'm gonna do this from home. And I think that really speaks to a wider issue of, who our transit systems and our transportation systems are serving. But I'm curious what, if there were any big takeaways or opportunities that looking at this research, knowing that we have a big city of workers that don't have that option, what can we maybe do that would be mutually beneficial for, people who do have the option to work from home, but also the folks that don't have that flexibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, as you see that descriptive statistic, you see there's a correlation between the frequency and the income, household income, right? As the telecommuting frequency increase, the household income increase. I mean, it's obvious, right? It's getting a lot of tech jobs, right? You can work from home with a computer and Wi-Fi.
Right.
But for a lot of other New Orleans service related jobs, you can't.
Right.
And so that's a very good question. We have to think about that. I think on one side that, as we see the telecommuting become more and more popular, we plan for that. But at the same time, we can't overlook the people who still do this, right? Their travel needs, we need to meet their needs too. But on the other thing, I think, we can do things that beneficial for both is, as this study found, still the built environment matters, how we build our cities, neighborhoods still matters to doesn't matter whether you telecommuting or not.
Right.
Right, so like you can still to promote, like more mixed use developments, transit oriented developments, those things that beneficial to, doesn't matter where, work from home or in workplace, yeah.
Yeah, and I would think that, reducing the burden, and that was my first thought when, you take a lot of the load off of like, I think of transit first, transportation systems as a whole, but when you take the burden off of your morning and evening commutes, it seems to me like that would be an opportunity to move some of those resources elsewhere to improve the transit system. So like if you lose 10% of people that aren't going downtown every day in the morning for that specific period of time, where can we use those vehicles? Or how can we come up with a maintenance system that can like improve the system further? So my wheels are ticking.
Yeah, especially, considering in a city like New Orleans, so many of the people who don't have that option of working from home are also already people that are not working 9 to 5 business hours,
That's true.
people who are working at restaurants and bars and, sanitation and all kinds of other jobs who don't have that ability to work from home, as that stress on the, 9 to 5 business commute is reduced. How do we, take resources and make them more available to those people who may be more likely in need of transit and active transportation options during times that aren't peak hours, and to redistribute, the buses and the other resources that we have to better meet the needs of people who are working outside of normal commute hours as well. Yes.
I can't remember where I heard this idea, but just going off of like if people are working from home more, that means that offices are going to be like less populated, and you don't need these huge buildings because they're not filled with people anymore. So maybe maybe an effect of that could be providing like sustainable housing, or turning those into, like, of course there's like zoning stuff, but what do you think about that, I guess?
That's good. Definitely it's happening. I haven't done research on that part yet, but I think, definitely there are talks, discussion about that. The area I just showed, like in San Francisco, the Bay Area, you have very high, vacancy on the commercial office buildings. And at the same time, right, like a lot of regions, they currently have the housing crisis.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there are talks about, to turn those space to housing. I don't know how you're going to do that, but I definitely think, worth to discuss to see what we can do about that.
Really good thought. Use California days, we did California and NHTS, and I'm not super familiar with NHTS, but the transit frequency that you have, is that by per service provider? Is it like an average for the state? It really is like the specific to that block group?
And so for this one, we use the smart groups location data from the EPA is at block group level. So it's for that block group. Yeah. And then in our other studies, we have our own household travel survey. We didn't do the survey, but we gathered those household survey from MPUs. In that, we oftentimes when we measure the transit is we do a buffer around household and to count the stops around that, like quarter mile or half mile, how many stops within that area.
Right, with the household.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Just thinking about Louisiana data, so hard to get some. Well, service providers. Don't publish anything. Took over 5 years. RTA is great, and we haven't seen, I don't think, a lot of change in our onboarding with RTA. It's been pretty consistent.
You mean
Because of the
post-COVID?
service, yeah, I think post-COVID
Yeah.
because of the service jobs.
Yeah.
But we are seeing more people like to get on bikes. Bus,
Yeah.
which maybe does come a little bit from that flexibility in schedule. At least someone exactly at time they could ride their bike. It takes longer.
Yeah.
There is.
We have time for maybe a few more questions.
Is
like, is there like research, like in conversation of what you're looking at, or where do you think this would come in if you think about school? Like the school context, because like one reason that like middle class professional or upper middle class professionals that are like, oh, it's great that I can have the flexibility because then I can go pick up my kids from school. And then also the in some contexts, in some places, like children over a certain age, like they don't have access to the yellow bus, and their option, if their parents don't pick them up and drop them off at their public school, is the public transit system. And so where can that fit into this conversation about moving the peak hours, and then also thinking about the availability and the demographic of people who have access to the telecommuting option and what they're doing with those extra trips?
I don't know. Yeah. In a separate study I've done in the past about students travel, and the more choice of students go to school, and there are also other literatures about like the parents. The parents, of course, right? The parents made that decision how kids go to school, but I think with if more parents have the option, they don't have to go to work. I think that will affect their decision about how they want their kids to go to school. But maybe that's future research too.
Yeah, I mean, ask anybody who's driven around New Orleans at 7:30 a.m. They know that schools cause congestion, and I think
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
and 3 o'clock, yeah. And I think it's really interesting to see the difference between schools that have a lot of kids that get dropped off by parents in single family or in single occupancy vehicles versus schools that have a ton of kids that take the bus versus kids that have a ton of kids, schools that have a ton of kids that take the public transit system. I mean, depending on which one of those it is, I mean, it's a completely different situation, and that really has an impact on, I mean, quality of life for everybody, not just the people going to that school, especially when it coincides with when everybody's trying to get to work.
Exactly.
I don't have so much of a question, but okay, it is a question. Like comparison wise, so I'm not from New Orleans and I live across the river, and that bridge, that one, during a certain time of day, so in the morning, they let in all the traffic going one way, and then at the other end of the day, they'll switch it. So it goes both, is that unique to New Orleans? I've never seen that in my life. No, that's not, okay.
Golden Gate Bridge does that.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
They have a zipper actually that moves the.
Oh, that's insane to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of management level is sort of, what we're looking at when we take a deep dive at these studies and see like what other ways that's, can confound people like me.
Well, I think you sort of mentioned that,
makes
that
sense.
those types of things are not going to, like, these existing structures and existing strategies that we have to target these specific peak hours of this is where people work, this is where people live.
Right.
And then switch, that we can't rely on that necessarily anymore, right?
Yeah, that's more like you traditionally like that's the traffic management program. Like a lot of people have that particular program to manage the peak hour traffic, like one strategy you just mentioned, because like traditional again, right? Like the downtown CBD is the largest cluster of jobs, and then suburb where people leave their homes, right? And during the day, CBD is very busy, and the residential is empty, right? It's switched at night, and but I think with the more adoption of telecommuting, I think that will make a change. Yeah.
Probably noticed that HOD lane already doesn't function that way because the new hacks have changed. You can see it right now.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of cities that are really using, I know like bedroom communities for a while, I know some people don't like that. But those towns for a while have been trying to keep people, especially in New Orleans, provide jobs in those towns so that they don't have people that have a 45-minute commute by Causeway every single day, but they have the option to not take that long commute, and that they have these jobs. So they're already working towards having job centers in these suburban areas. And that in and of itself, I mean, then you have people reverse commuting from downtown New Orleans to, you know, these suburban communities, and they're trying to do that, so obviously.
That's the point, right? The mixed use, we don't need those single use
Exactly.
segregated, zoning within the mixed use development. So, there are opportunity to work and live in the same place or closer to each other. Don't have to.
I love all of the conversation that's happening, and I think this has opened up a really interesting, narrative for all of us here. Unfortunately, we are at time, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, as this is a lot of people's lunch. I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today, here and online. And again, I apologize for our early technical difficulties for those of you all joining us on Zoom. I want to give a special thanks to WSP and to Metro APA for helping put on this event, and of course to the USDOT for funding CETOC. We wouldn't be here without them. And I hope that you all stay tuned for hopefully more collaborations with us, and also, of course, more independent events coming from both Metro APA and from CETOC in the future. So thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a lovely weekend.
Yeah, I also want to add, just if there are certain topics, like you're super interested related to your work, if we have research in CETOC, we can do this kind of events. But at the same time, we can invite other speakers to use this as a platform, right? To bring people to speak to the topic you're super interested in, not necessarily at CETOC, at but across the country. So we can do that. Yeah, just let us know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.